Welcome to this peaceful moment. Here, you will discover stories inspired by the quiet beauty of Japan. Each tale is like a soft breeze through a bamboo grove, carrying you away from the worries of the day. Imagine the scent of blooming cherry blossoms and the gentle flow of a nearby clear stream. Let these words and sounds cradle your mind in calm and serenity. Tonight, permit yourself to drift into a restful sleep. Let us begin this journey together. Footsteps on the frosted bridge. Prologue: the bridge in winter. At the edge of a mountain village lay an old wooden bridge that spanned a narrow river. Its beams were worn smooth by years of rain, sun, and countless crossings, and when winter came, frost clung to its railings like crystal lace. The villagers called it the Bridge of Breath, for on cold mornings, the mist of those who crossed it hung in the air like drifting spirits. Children were warned not to linger there after dark. Some said the bridge remembered every step, and that the frost held voices of those who had walked across it long ago. It was here that a young scholar named Akio returned after many years away, his heart heavy with memories he had long tried to forget. The scholar returns. Akio had left the village as a boy to study in the city. His father, a stern man who valued learning above all, had sent him away with the words books will take you farther than rivers and bridges. Yet as Akio grew older, those words became a burden. He had earned respect as a scholar, but loneliness followed him. The city was vast, crowded, yet empty of the voices he had once known, the laughter of his childhood friend Yui. The gentle chiding of his grandmother, the sound of snow crunching beneath familiar feet. When word came that his father had passed, Akio returned. The village looked smaller than he remembered, but the bridge looked the same, silent, weathered, cloaked in frost. As he crossed it for the first time in years, the sound of his own footsteps startled him. Each echo rang sharp in the cold, as though the bridge itself were listening. A memory beneath the frost. That night, unable to sleep, Akio wandered back to the bridge. The moon hung low, casting silver across the ice. And as he stepped onto the boards, he heard another sound, a faint echo, not his own. He froze. Then, like breath in winter air, a voice drifted through the silence. Akio, you came back. He turned, but no one was there. Only the frost, the river beneath, and the groan of old wood. His heart raced. He knew that voice. Yui. The girl by the bridge. Yui had been Akio's closest friend. They grew up together, playing near the river, chasing dragonflies, carving their names into the wooden posts of the bridge. She had dreamed of becoming a poet, though few in the village valued such things. The winter before Akio left for the city, Yui had fallen ill. He remembered visiting her once, her cheeks pale, her smile thin as paper. He promised to write, to return soon. But letters never came, and when he finally asked his father, the answer had been cold. She is gone. The bridge has one less voice. Akio had buried the memory deep within his studies. But now, standing in the frost, the voice of Yui returned, soft as snow. Whispers across the frost. Each night, Akio returned to the bridge. And each night, Yui's presence grew clearer. Sometimes he heard her laugh, echoing faintly. Sometimes he felt the boards shift, as though another pair of feet walked beside him. "Why did you leave?" she asked once, her voice trembling like a winter breeze. "I thought I had no choice," he whispered back. "Did you forget me?" His throat tightened. "No. I tried, but I never could." The frost glimmered beneath the moon, as though sealing their words in silence. The village's fear. Soon, the villagers noticed Akio's nightly wanderings. An old woman warned him. "The bridge keeps what it loves. Too many footsteps and it won't let you go." A fisherman muttered, "Spirits walk there. Better not to answer them." But Akio could not stay away. He was drawn, not by fear, but by longing. The bridge was the only place where Yui still lived, even if only in whispers and frost. The first snowfall. One night, as snow drifted softly across the beams, Yui's voice was stronger than ever. "Do you remember the poem we wrote together?" Akio closed his eyes. A memory stirred the two of them sitting on the bridge, scratching words into a scrap of paper. Snow falls, but footsteps remain. Even when hearts part, the bridge remembers. "Yes," Akio whispered. "I remember." A faint shape appeared then, pale and shimmering, as if the frost itself had gathered into form. Yui stood before him, her hair like dark ink against the snow. "You came back," she said, smiling softly. Tears blurred Akio's eyes. "I was too late." "Not too late," she whispered. "Only late enough." The weight of regret. From that night on, Yui's figure sometimes appeared beside him. They walked the bridge together, their steps muffled by frost. She asked about the city, about the books he had read, the temples he had seen. He asked her about the village, the winters he had missed. But the more they spoke, the heavier Akio's heart grew. He wanted to hold her, but each time he reached out, his hand passed through cold air. "Can you forgive me?" he asked one night. Yui's eyes shone like moonlit ice. "There is nothing to forgive. But you must learn to forgive yourself." The breaking frost. Winter deepened. One night, a storm came, shaking the bridge with icy wind. The river roared below, swollen with snowmelt. Akio rushed to the bridge, fearing Yui would vanish. She was there, her form faint against the storm. "Akio," she cried, "the bridge cannot hold me much longer. The frost will break, and I must go." "No," he shouted, gripping the railing. "Don't leave me again." Her voice wavered, a whisper in the gale. "I will never leave. Every step you take, I will be there. But you must live. Carry me in your footsteps." The frost cracked beneath them. With one last smile, Yui's figure dissolved into the snow. Epilogue. The bridge remembers. When the storm passed, the bridge remained, weathered but unbroken. Akio stood alone, yet not empty. He understood now the bridge did not trap voices. It preserved them, so they could be heard by those willing to listen. He carved Yui's poem into the wood of the railing, his breath clouding in the cold. Snow falls, but footsteps remain. Even when hearts part, the bridge remembers. Years later, villagers spoke of the scholar who came home and walked the frosted bridge each night, whispering softly to someone unseen. Some feared him, some pitied him. But those who listened closely swore they could hear two sets of footsteps on the boards, light and gentle, as if the frost itself carried memory forward. And when the wind blew just right, the whispers rose again, soft as snow. Every step I am with you. Lantern glow through the mist. Prologue: the village in the vale. The valley was a place where mists lingered, rising from the river and spilling across the rice paddies. Weaving around the eaves of houses, and clinging to the hillsides as though reluctant to depart. The villagers often said that mist was the breath of the earth itself, a reminder that all things were alive and interwoven. Among the winding paths of stone and moss, lanterns stood in rows, wooden posts topped with glass or paper shades. Glowing each night with firelight that pushed against the pale, shifting veil. These lanterns did not merely light the way, they were symbols, guardians of memory, reminders that warmth endured even when the world seemed obscured. For generations, the lanterns had been lit at dusk by the same family. It was their duty to carry flame through the fog, one by one, until the whole path shimmered like a constellation pulled down to earth. The villagers said that as long as the lanterns shone, the lost would always find their way home. The lantern keeper's grandson, Haru, had grown up watching his grandfather walk the path with a small oil lamp in hand, stopping at each post to kindle the waiting lantern. The ritual fascinated him, the way a single spark could chase away shadow, how light spread not in haste but with patience, one step at a time. When Haru was still a boy, his grandfather told him, "These lanterns are more than wood and flame. They carry voices." "Voices?" Haru asked, eyes wide. "Of those who came before us. Each light remembers a step taken, a word spoken, a farewell whispered. When you walk this path, you are never alone." At that age, Haru believed him without question. He would follow closely, watching mist curl and scatter as lanterns bloomed one by one. Sometimes he thought he heard faint murmurs, like laughter fading through the fog. But as he grew older, he wondered if it was only imagination or his grandfather's stories meant to keep tradition alive. Return of the Mist. Years passed. Haru left the village to study in the city, where light came from wires and switches, not flame. Lanterns became decoration, stripped of reverence. Mist was not a veil of mystery but a nuisance that delayed trains. Then one winter, a letter reached him. His grandfather had passed away. Haru returned, guilt pressing against his chest. The village looked smaller than memory. The mists seemed heavier, clinging like sorrow. That evening, he followed the old path. The lanterns stood unlit, swallowed by fog. The air smelled of damp wood, silence hanging heavy. Haru realized that no one had taken up the duty since his grandfather's death. The path looked lost. The villagers whispered that spirits now wandered restlessly, unable to find their way. Something in Haru stirred. Without deciding, he took his grandfather's old oil lamp and began to walk, lighting the path. At the first lantern, his hands trembled. He struck flint, coaxed flame, and watched as the glass shade came alive with orange warmth. Mist recoiled, shadows bent. For a moment, Haru felt a weight lift, as though unseen eyes blinked open. Step by step, he moved along the path. Each lantern flared like a star breaking through the cloud. The further he walked, the more certain he felt that someone walked beside him. Halfway across the path, he heard it, a voice, soft as breath. "You came back." He froze. The flame quivered. The mist curled close, as if listening. The voice was unmistakable. It was his grandfather's. The lanterns speak. That night, Haru did not sleep. He lit every lantern and walked until dawn, listening. Between the sigh of mist and the crackle of flame, whispers stirred. Some sounded like greetings, others like songs. One lantern carried laughter, another a sob. It was as if the entire lineage of the village, every ancestor who had crossed this path, was speaking at once, fragments woven into the mist, awakened only by light. His grandfather's voice was strongest at the final lantern by the river. "You are the keeper now," it said. "Do not let the path go dark." Tears blurred Haru's sight. For the first time in years, he bowed his head not to duty, but to belonging. A village divided, but not everyone welcomed the return of the lanterns. Some villagers said it was foolishness, a relic of the past. Why cling to superstition? The dead are gone. Others, though, felt comfort. They claimed they had heard their loved ones again, faint but true. A widow said she heard her husband's song carried through the mist. A child swore his mother's lullaby drifted from the flame. The village divided, skeptics mocking, believers gathering each dusk to watch Haru walk the path. Haru did not seek devotion nor argument. He lit the lanterns because he felt he must. Still, doubt gnawed at him. Were the voices real, or memories shaped by grief? The stranger in the mist. One evening, as he lit the fifth lantern, Haru noticed a figure standing at the far end of the path. The mist clung so tightly he could barely see, yet the silhouette was clear, a woman in a white kimono, unmoving. He called out, but she did not answer. He took a step, then another. The closer he came, the further the mist stretched, until the figure blurred and vanished. That night, he dreamed of her. She stood beside the lanterns, gazing into the glow. Her face was pale, her eyes sorrowful. When he woke, the image clung to him. Was she spirit or memory? And why had she come? Secrets of the river. Old villagers whispered of the woman. Long ago, a bride had drowned in the river on her wedding night. her lantern slipping from her grasp into the current. Since then, her spirit was said to wander, searching for her lost light. Haru began to linger at the river's edge after lighting the final lantern. Mist thickened there, coiling like a shroud. Some nights, he thought he saw her reflection rippling in the black water. And then, one night, she spoke. "Do you carry my lantern?" Her voice was sorrow and longing braided together. Haru's hand tightened on the lamp. He felt the weight of generations pressing through the glass. "Perhaps I do," he whispered. "Between worlds." From then on, each night grew stranger. The mist grew denser, and the voices louder. Haru felt himself caught between two worlds: the living, who argued about his task, and the departed, who leaned close to the flame. The woman's presence became constant. She walked beside him, though villagers could not see. Sometimes she smiled faintly, sometimes she wept. One evening, she said, "If the lanterns ever go dark, we will vanish forever." Haru felt a chill. He had thought the duty symbolic, but now it seemed essential, as if the light itself tethered memory to the world. The Festival of Lanterns. Spring came. The village decided to revive an old tradition, a festival where every household lit a lantern to honor their ancestors. For the first time in decades, the path glowed brighter than stars. Children laughed, elders wept, the mist danced with flame. Haru walked the path slowly, watching the woman's spirit glow brighter than ever before. "Tonight," she said, "you have given us life. Then stay," he begged. But her smile was wistful. "I was bound by sorrow. Now, by light, I am free." When the festival ended, so too did her form. The mist lifted slightly, revealing stars above. Epilogue: the Keeper of Flame. Years rolled on. Haru never left the village again. Each dusk, he lit the lanterns, and each dawn, he walked the path alone. The villagers still argued, some believing, some doubting, but all respected the lanterns. Children followed him, wide-eyed, just as he had once followed his grandfather. And sometimes, when the mist curled thick and the flame flared high, Haru heard a familiar voice, his grandfather's steady tone, the widow's soft song, the laughter of children long gone. The lanterns glowed, carrying voices through the veil. And the mist, though it obscured, was never truly silenced. As long as someone carried the flame, the path would never be lost. The silent voice of the old temple. Prologue: the temple beyond time. On the mountainside, where cedars grew tall and mists lingered even at midday, stood an old temple. Its wooden beams had darkened with centuries of rain, its roof sagged under the weight of moss, and its bells, though rarely struck, seemed to echo forever in memory. Villagers said the temple had a voice, not one that spoke with words, but one that drifted in silence. When the wind stirred the prayer flags or when moonlight touched the stone steps, one could almost hear whispers, not from the present but from ages past. Some called it superstition, others reverence. But all agreed the temple was alive. No one lived there anymore. Monks had left long ago, the grounds forgotten except for rare pilgrims. Yet each dusk, the place seemed to breathe, as though waiting for someone to listen. The return of Kato. Kato had not been to the mountain in 12 years. He had left the village as a young boy, following his parents to the city. But after his father's passing, he returned with heavy steps, carrying not only grief but a longing he did not fully understand. The village was smaller than he remembered, its paths quiet, its houses leaning closer to the earth. But the mountain looked unchanged, its forests dense, its temple shrouded as if it had been waiting for him. The villagers warned him not to go. "The temple is empty," they said. "Its silence is heavy. Best leave the past alone." But silence was precisely what Kato sought. That night, lamp in hand, he walked the path upward, each step crunching against fallen cedar needles. The silence that speaks. When Kato reached the temple gates, he stopped. The wood was cracked, the hinges rusted, yet the structure stood tall, proud against the mist. He pushed the doors, and they groaned like voices waking from slumber. Inside, the air was cool, carrying scents of incense long extinguished. The great bell hung motionless. The altar stood bare. Yet as he walked across the creaking floorboards, Kato felt the silence pressing close, wrapping around him, listening. And then he heard it. Not words, but a hum, soft and low, like breath caught between sigh and song. He froze. The lantern flame flickered. His heart pounded. The temple was not empty. It was speaking. The voice of memory. That night, Kato sat by the altar, lamp burning low, ears straining. The voice grew clearer the longer he stayed. It was not one voice, but many layered whispers, chants overlapping with prayers, the laughter of children, the solemn tones of monks. He realized the temple was holding memory itself, as though every sound ever uttered within its walls had not vanished, but remained, woven into silence. At dawn, he stepped outside. Mist curled around the bell tower, and for a moment, he thought he saw figures monks in saffron robes walking the courtyard, villagers kneeling with offerings. Then the light shifted, and the vision was gone. But he knew now the temple was not abandoned. It was waiting to be heard. The keeper of echoes. Kato began visiting daily. At first, he only listened. Each day the voices grew stronger until he could distinguish them, a chant repeated across decades. A prayer whispered by a mother, the stern instruction of a teacher monk. Soon, the temple seemed to recognize him. Its creaks grew softer, its shadows less heavy. The silence no longer pressed, it welcomed. And then came the voice he knew. His father's. Kato. The sound was faint but undeniable. He dropped to his knees. Tears blurred his sight. His father had once brought him here as a boy, teaching him how to bow, how to listen to bells. The memory surged like river water breaking a dam. The temple had remembered what Kato had forgotten. The villagers' fear. News spread quickly. Some villagers saw Kato walking with a lantern through the temple grounds. his lips moving as though answering someone unseen. "He hears them," they whispered. "The temple speaks to him." Some feared him, saying he had invited spirits too close. Others pitied him, thinking grief had unmoored his mind. But there were a few who approached him quietly, asking if he could listen for their loved ones. An old woman begged him, "Does the temple still carry my husband's prayer?" A boy asked if it held his mother's laughter. Kato did not promise, but he listened. And often, the temple answered. The spirit in the bell tower. One night, while tending to the lanterns, Kato heard a distinct voice, unlike the rest. It was deeper, sharper, resonant. "Do not let the bell fall silent." Startled, he climbed the worn steps of the bell tower. There, amid mist and shadow, he saw a figure clad in monk's robes, tall and unmoving. Its face was hidden, but its voice filled the air like a struck chord. "This temple exists because sound is eternal," it said. "But if the bell is forgotten, silence will devour all." Kato's hands trembled. "Who are you?" The figure did not answer. It simply pointed to the great bell and vanished into the mist. Awakening the bell. The next evening, Kato gathered his strength and pulled the rope. The bell groaned, then thundered, its deep tone rolling down the mountainside, vibrating through stone and tree. The sound was immense, yet within it, Kato heard something else, voices rising, prayers swelling, as though thousands joined in harmony. Villagers below stopped in their tracks. Some wept, some crossed themselves, some simply listened, remembering. From that night on, the bell was struck each dusk, and its sound carried not just across the valley but through memory itself. The Festival of Echoes. Seasons turned. The villagers, once wary, began to return. They cleaned moss from the steps, repaired the gates, and lit candles along the path. A festival was declared, the Festival of Echoes, where each family brought offerings not only for the living but for the remembered voices the temple still held. Kato walked among them, lantern in hand. The silence was no longer heavy. It had become music, woven of countless threads. And among the whispers, he often heard his father, steady and warm. "Do you see now, Kato? Nothing truly vanishes. Sound, memory, love, they remain, if someone will listen." Epilogue. The Eternal Voice. Years later, when Kato himself grew old, he passed the duty to a young boy who followed him faithfully each evening. "The temple is not empty," Kato told him. "It is full of voices. All you must do is listen." And so the bell rang, the lanterns glowed, and the silence spoke. The temple endured, not as ruin, not as relic, but as a vessel of memory, its silent voice eternal, waiting for anyone who dared to hear. Cherry blossoms on the river current. Prologue. The blossoms that drift away. Each spring, the river carried the blossoms. From the trees lining its banks, thousands of pale petals fell, caught by the current, carried downstream until they vanished into the distance. Villagers often gathered at the water's edge to watch. They said the blossoms carried prayers, memories, and sorrows, taking them far away where they might rest. Lovers cast petals to seal vows, children tossed them to make wishes, and the old whispered to them, as though petals could carry messages to the departed. The river was not merely water. It was a passage of time itself, flowing past, bearing away the seasons, the years, the lives. And beneath the blossoms, there was always a story waiting. The return of Aiko. Aiko had not seen the river in 10 years. She had left her hometown at 16, carrying only a small bundle of clothes and dreams of the city. Life there had been hurried, glittering, and often cruel. When her mother's health declined, Aiko returned. Her old village looked smaller, yet the river remained wide, endless, its voice unchanged. The cherry trees were in bloom when she arrived, their blossoms drifting exactly as they had in her childhood. Standing on the bank, she felt the years dissolve. The river accepted her return without question, carrying petals as it always had, carrying time itself. The boy by the water. Aiko was not the only one who lingered by the river. Each dusk, she noticed a boy sitting at the stone steps that touched the current, sketchbook in hand. He drew endlessly the curve of branches, the ripples in the water, the scattering of petals. One evening, she approached. "You draw every day," she said. The boy looked up, startled, then smiled shyly. "I'm trying to capture it. But the blossoms change with every breath of wind. I never finish." Aiko glanced at his page. Dozens of half-drawn petals were scattered across it, as though the sketches themselves were caught in a current. "Maybe that's the point," she said softly. "The blossoms can't be finished. They're meant to drift. Memories beneath the blossoms." As days passed, Aiko returned often. She sat with the boy, sometimes in silence, telling stories of her childhood by the river, how she and her friends used to float paper boats, how she once fell in and ruined her sandals, how her father used to lift her onto his shoulders so she could reach a branch heavy with blossoms. The boy listened intently, sketching all the while. Then one day, he asked, "Do you ever feel like the river remembers?" Aiko blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean the petals fall every year, but maybe the river keeps them all. Maybe it holds every blossom, every wish, every prayer. Like it holds time itself." His words lingered in her mind long after she went home. The Lantern Festival. That spring, the village held its annual festival. At dusk, lanterns were lit and set upon the river, each glowing softly as it drifted, carrying prayers and remembrance. Aiko joined, holding a lantern between her palms. For the first time in years, she whispered her father's name, wishing him peace. She placed the lantern gently on the water and watched it float, surrounded by blossoms like stars scattered on black silk. Beside her, the boy set a lantern too. "For my sister," he murmured. His voice trembled, but he said no more. The river carried both lanterns side by side until the distance blurred them into a single glow. The Confession of the River. Spring deepened, and Aiko felt herself drawn not only to the blossoms but to the boy's company. He reminded her of herself at his age, quiet, uncertain, searching. One night, beneath moonlight, he spoke. "My sister loved the blossoms. She used to collect them, press them in books. But the year she died, the blossoms were late. She never saw them." His voice cracked. "That's why I draw them. To give her the blossoms she missed." Aiko placed her hand on his shoulder. She felt the silence of the river around them, heavy but gentle, as though it, too, had listened. "The blossoms reach everyone," she said softly. "Even those who can't see them. The river carries them farther than we can follow." The dream beneath the petals. That night, Aiko dreamed. She stood by the river, blossoms falling not only from branches but from the sky itself. The water shone like silver, and among the drifting petals she saw faces: her father, smiling; the boy's sister, laughing softly; countless others, each carried by the current, at peace. The river whispered, "Nothing is lost. Everything flows." When she awoke, she carried the dream like a secret. The river's promise. Summer came, and the blossoms were gone. The river now carried only green reflections and the slow hum of insects. Yet Aiko no longer felt the emptiness she once did. She had learned what the boy had seen. The river remembered. Before returning to the city, she walked once more to the bank. The boy was there, sketchbook filled now with petals, branches, lanterns, and faces. She smiled. "Keep drawing. One day, the river will be full of your sister's blossoms." He nodded, tears glimmering but unfallen. Together they watched the water. It flowed steadily, eternal, carrying all things forward. Epilogue: blossoms without end. Years later, when Aiko thought back to the village, the image that returned was always the same: blossoms scattering on the river, endless, weightless, fleeting. But they were never truly gone. For in drifting, they became part of something larger: memory, time, love carried onward by the current that never ceased. And in that endless flow, nothing was lost. The blossoms remained, always moving, always alive. The path through falling leaves. Prologue: the turning of the season. The first leaf fell in silence. It drifted gently from the tall maple tree at the edge of the village, its red surface catching the sunlight like a flicker of fire. Soon another followed, and another, until the path that led toward the forest was scattered with crimson and gold. The villagers often said that autumn was a bridge between the worlds: between youth and age, between presence and memory, between the living and the departed. The path through the falling leaves was the place where those bridges could be felt most clearly. For those who walked it, the path did not simply lead into the forest. It led into the heart of themselves. Aya's return. Aya had been gone from her village for nearly 15 years. The city had taken her youth, filling it with urgency, work, and dreams of ambition that slowly frayed into exhaustion. When her grandmother passed away, Aya returned to attend the funeral. On the morning after, restless, she walked the path she had once known so well, the path through the forest, beneath the canopy of maples. She remembered running along it as a child, crunching leaves beneath her feet, her grandmother walking slowly behind her with a smile. Now, as an adult, Aya felt the weight of silence. The leaves fell softly, as though welcoming her back. The encounter. As she walked deeper into the forest, Aya saw a figure ahead, a man, older than her, with hair streaked with gray. He carried a basket filled with fallen leaves, carefully chosen, as though each held a story. When their eyes met, he nodded politely. "Gathering for winter fires?" Aya asked. The man smiled faintly. "Not fires. Memories. These leaves will dry, and I'll press them into books. Each year, I collect them. Each year they remind me of the seasons I've lived." Aya was struck by the gentleness in his tone, and by the strange sense that he, too, was walking not only the path of the forest, but the path of memory. The echo of childhood. That evening, Aya stayed in her grandmother's old home. The walls carried scents of wood and smoke, and when she opened a chest of belongings, she found an old pressed leaf, kept between pages of a faded diary. The memory rushed back, her grandmother teaching her to press leaves, saying, "These are not just leaves. They are time, caught for a moment. When you hold them later, you will remember everything." Aya held the brittle leaf in her palm and realized she had forgotten so much of who she was. The old man's tale. In the days that followed, Aya walked the path often, sometimes encountering the old man again. He introduced himself as Haruto, a retired teacher who had never left the village. One evening, as the sun bled through the canopy, Haruto shared his story. "My wife used to walk this path with me. We would gather leaves every autumn. When she passed, I kept walking. At first, I thought it was only grief that led me here. But I realized it wasn't only about remembering her. It was about remembering myself. The person I was with her, the seasons I lived, the life that still flows within me." Aya listened in silence, her heart tightening. His words echoed in her own unspoken ache, her years in the city, her sense of losing herself. The path's whisper. The path changed as autumn deepened. Leaves piled thick, creating a carpet of fire and sunlight. The air grew colder, and each step seemed to release the faint scent of earth and rain. One morning, Aya closed her eyes and simply listened. The sound of leaves falling was not silence, it was a language. A whisper of impermanence, a reminder that all things must pass, yet all things return. She thought of her grandmother's hands, warm and wrinkled. She thought of the laughter of childhood friends long gone. She thought of her own restless years away, chasing something she could no longer name. The path was speaking, and she was finally ready to hear. Lanterns among the leaves. When the autumn festival came, villagers carried lanterns along the path at dusk. Each lantern bore a wish, a prayer, or a memory. As they walked, the path glowed softly, leaves crunching beneath their feet, lanterns swaying like fireflies in the dark. Aya carried one too. On hers, she wrote simply to remember who I am. As she set the lantern at the small stream that crossed the path, she felt tears slip down her cheeks. She had not cried at her grandmother's funeral, nor in the city during her loneliest nights. But here, beneath the falling leaves, her heart finally opened. Haruto, standing nearby, placed his lantern beside hers. "We all walk this path," he said. "Some sooner, some later. But the leaves remind us there is beauty in falling, too." The promise of return. The festival ended, but Aya lingered in the village for weeks. She walked the path daily, sometimes alone, sometimes with Haruto. She began pressing leaves again, placing them carefully in a notebook she found among her grandmother's things. One afternoon, she looked at Haruto and said, "When I return to the city, I'll bring these leaves with me. They'll remind me that I'm not lost. That the path is still here, waiting." Haruto nodded, smiling. "The path is always here. It's within you now." Epilogue: The Endless Path. Years later, Aya often sat in her small city apartment, flipping through pages of pressed leaves. Each one carried the scent of autumn, the sound of footsteps on the path, the voice of her grandmother, and the wisdom of Haruto. And each autumn, no matter where she was, she walked a path of her own through falling leaves, knowing the truth the village had always known. The path is not only through the forest. It is through the heart, through memory, through time itself. Beneath the falling leaves, all lives meet. All things flow. Evening Song of the Mountain Stream. Prologue: The Whisper of Waters. In the heart of a valley surrounded by towering mountains, there was a small village where the rhythm of life flowed gently. Much like the mountain stream that ran beside it. The villagers worked the rice fields, tended to their gardens, and shared the warmth of hearth and song during long winter nights. Yet, for all the daily labor and community chatter, there existed an ancient belief, half forgotten and half remembered, that the stream itself carried a living spirit, one that sang when evening fell. Children often repeated tales told by their grandparents when the day sighs into night. If you listen closely, you may hear the mountain stream hum a song no human voice could carry. That is the mountain's breath, its heart revealed in sound. Most laughed at the story, dismissing it as old superstition. But for a boy named Ren, that whispering belief was more than a story. It was the axis around which his young world turned. Ren by the water. Ren was 13 when the story truly began. He had always been different from the other boys in the village. While they raced through the fields or hunted for birds with makeshift slings, Ren preferred to sit by the water's edge, his eyes fixed on the ripples, his ears attuned to its gentle murmur. His mother would often sigh. "Ren, you'll catch a chill sitting there. Come inside, help with the weaving or the firewood." But Ren only smiled softly. "The stream is teaching me something, Mother. I can't quite explain it." She shook her head, yet she did not scold him further. For she, too, had once been a dreamer before life's burdens pressed her into practicality. Ren began to notice patterns in the sound of the stream's subtle rises and falls, moments of silence, then sudden rushes of song as the water leapt over stones. To him, it was not noise. It was music. Each evening, he lingered longer, listening, his heart stirred by something he could not yet name. The first encounter. It was in the late summer, when cicadas droned in the heat of the fading day, that Ren first heard it, a melody unlike any he had known. At first, he thought it was only the stream as usual, but then the sound wove into distinct notes, clear and sorrowful, like the plucking of a distant harp. He followed the sound upstream, his bare feet brushing through tall grasses, until he reached a bend where the water ran smooth as glass. There, above the surface, stood a woman. Her figure shimmered like mist, translucent yet solid enough that Ren could see her hands trailing across the air as though playing invisible strings. Her hair fell long like a dark river, her eyes glowed with the depth of twilight, and her white robe blended seamlessly with the colors of dusk. Ren gasped. Who are you?" The woman's lips curved into a tender smile. "I am the voice you have been hearing all your life. I am the song of this mountain stream, the breath of waters that flow from stone to valley." Ren trembled, torn between awe and disbelief. "You're the stream? I am its spirit," she said softly. "And you, child, are one who truly listens." Lessons of the stream. From that evening on, Ren returned night after night. Sometimes the woman appeared, sometimes only her voice lingered in the currents, but each time Ren felt his soul broaden. She taught him to listen not just with ears, but with heart. "The water speaks of all it touches," she told him. "It sings of the rain that feeds it, the stones it carves, the fish that swim through its embrace. If you open yourself, you will hear the world as one song." Ren tried. At first, all he heard was the rushing of water. But slowly, he began to catch fragments, the hum of earthworms beneath soil, the sigh of trees leaning toward evening. Even the distant cry of hawks gliding through fading skies. He repeated these sounds to himself, shaping them into little melodies. At home, he hummed softly as he worked until his younger sister giggled, "Ren, you sound like the stream." He smiled, for it was the greatest compliment he could imagine. The burden of silence. Yet not everyone welcomed Ren's devotion. The villagers grew wary. Some whispered that the boy was bewitched. Others feared that he was wasting his youth in idle fancies. His father, a stern man hardened by years in the fields, confronted him one evening. "Ren, enough of this nonsense. You'll inherit the fields one day. Stop wandering after voices in the water. No spirit will put rice on our table." Ren bowed his head but said nothing. In his heart, he knew he could not abandon the song. The spirit of the stream appeared to him that night, her face shadowed with sorrow. "You must not forsake your duty to family," she said gently. "But nor must you silence your soul. Balance, Ren." Balance is the key, as it is in all things. Her words haunted him. Balance, but how could he balance two worlds so far apart? The village festival. The autumn festival arrived, celebrating harvest and the turning of seasons. Lanterns glowed across the village, drums echoed, and people sang songs handed down for generations. Yet, amid the clamor, Ren felt restless. When his turn came to join in the singing, his voice wavered. The notes of the villagers' song clashed against the melody that pulsed within him, the deeper, wilder song of the stream. Suddenly, without thinking, Ren sang not the old verses, but a tune he had learned from the river's voice. It rose pure and haunting, unlike anything the villagers had ever heard. The crowd fell silent. Then, murmurs spread. Some were moved, their eyes shining with wonder. Others frowned, whispering of strangeness, of danger. Ren's father turned pale with anger. But before he could speak, the village elder raised a hand. "This song I have heard it once before. Long ago, when I was a boy, they said the stream sang to chosen hearts. Perhaps the boy carries that gift." The villagers quieted, torn between awe and fear. Ren stood trembling, not knowing whether he had brought honor or shame. The storm. Soon after the festival, dark clouds gathered. A storm unlike any the village had known struck the valley. Torrents of rain swelled the mountain stream into a raging torrent, threatening to sweep away homes and fields. Ren rushed to the riverbank, desperate. "Spirit of the stream, please, help us." Through the roar of the flood, he heard her voice broken, strained. "I cannot calm this storm alone. Nature has its fury, as it has its peace. But if you sing with me, your voice may weave harmony into chaos." Ren's heart pounded. He climbed onto a rock, raised his voice, and sang the melodies she had taught him, the rise and fall of currents, the lull of evening waters. To his astonishment, the raging waters shifted. Their fury softened, flowing around the village instead of through it. The storm still raged, but the village was spared. Exhausted, Ren collapsed, his voice hoarse, but the villagers carried him home like a hero. A bridge between worlds. From that day, everything changed. No longer did the villagers call him strange. They sought his songs, believing them to be blessings. His father, once doubtful, looked at him with quiet pride. But Ren knew the truth: it was not his power alone. It was the voice of the stream, the endless song of nature that had flowed through him. He continued to visit the river each evening. Sometimes the spirit appeared, smiling, her eyes shimmering like moonlit waters. Other times, he felt only her presence in the currents. But always, he sang. And as years passed, Ren grew into a man whose voice became legend. Travelers from distant valleys came to hear the evening song of the mountain stream. They said it carried peace to the troubled, hope to the weary, and memory to the forgotten. Epilogue: the eternal song. Ren grew old, but his devotion never waned. On his final evening, frail but smiling, he walked to the riverbank once more. The spirit appeared, radiant as ever. "You have carried my song faithfully," she said. "Through you, the mountain's voice has reached many hearts." Ren bowed his head. "It was never mine alone. I was only the listener, the vessel." She extended her hand, and as he took it, his spirit dissolved into the flowing water. From that night on, the villagers swore they heard two voices in the stream, one the eternal spirit, and one the gentle echo of Ren. Thus the evening song continued, flowing with the river, carried on the wind. A reminder that to listen deeply is to live fully, and to sing with the world is to become part of its endless harmony.